Hi, if you or your children are suffering because of your relationship with your ex-partner, because it's stressed or strained, or maybe they're just not a nice person, this show is for you. Welcome to the High Conflict Co-Parenting Podcast with Brooke Olson and Charlie Jewett. Enjoy another episode now. All right, Mr. Brooke Olson, you ready to go for episode number 6?
Ready to go.
Hey, everybody. Brooke Olson, Charlie Jewett, High Conflict Co-Parenting Podcast, episode number 6. This one is on high conflict personalities. So, Brooke, I'm familiar with this on a personal level, but what do you mean by high conflict personalities?
Well, typically, Charlie, we've got personalities that like to fight. We've got personalities that really fall into conflict easily, and it has to do with brain development. It has to do with attachment styles. And it has to do with a continuum in all of that. So when we're looking at high conflict personalities, typically we're looking at axis 2, cluster B personalities, but that's the far end of the spectrum. That's that place where they've tipped over the threshold of what would be called personality disorders. However, there's a continuum that leads up to that. And that's what I want to spend some time really talking about today is what the attachment styles are that go with those personality disorders, how they got there, and how to really begin to manage them. That's what I really want to talk about in the large picture today.
So some people, it sounds like, just like to fight more than others, or like to be in arguments, or it's familiar with them. And then some people actually go on the continuum. They're sick, right? There's somehow they need it, or what's that all about?
Well, when we start to talk about personality disorders, when we get to that level, there is in the DSM a category, and it's basically the three categories that we see in high conflict situations are borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, and histrionic personality disorder. And these three have a tendency to cluster together. And my experience is that they're different, but they're very similar in their origins and in their expression. And when we can understand the history behind it, when we can understand the brain development behind it, then we're not as reactive to it. We don't have to judge it. We can just go, oh, that's what it is, and this is how I manage it. And that's the basic. I mean, if we did nothing else in this series and the listeners got that piece, they would be rock stars.
So don't get mad at Stevie Wonder because he can't read, but understand, right? That if you're asking him to read to your children every night and he's not doing it, it's probably not going to happen. And the idea here is not figure out what your ex is if they have one of these and then run to the judge, and the judge is going to go, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that. You win. It's not for court necessarily, because the person who's listening is not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but would be just if you're dealing with these people all the time, it could be helpful to understand where they're coming from,
right. And you know this personally too, and the idea actually comes down to, you absolutely don't want to run to a judge or an FCS counselor or somebody that's involved in your case and say, this is what I see. I have people come to me all the time and say, my ex is borderline, my ex is narcissistic, my ex is X, and it's not helpful because they don't understand what that really means. They just understand how they have become reactive to it.
Yeah.
And, a lot of this stuff has to do with their family of origin history, what they grew up in, and what they react to in it. So we've talked about this in the past a little bit in earlier podcasts about that projection, that perception of something that may or may not be true. And when we start to change that perception, it starts to look differently.
Right.
And this is what we're really pushing at today.
So before you jump into these, are these biological, meaning some difference in the structure of someone's brain? Is it just learned behavior? What are these personality disorders? Where do they come from?
Well, the attachment styles is where we'll start with the conversation, and they are kind of learned behaviors. It's like, this is what I experienced, and this is where my anxiety comes from. This is where my perspective about needing to be right comes from. And as we move outward into those styles, they become more ingrained developmentally over time. And if they reach their apex, where they go over the threshold and become these disorders, we know through studies, through MRI studies of brains with people with these diagnoses, that there is a developmental piece that is lacking in the brain. So it is physiological. It is embedded in their neurobiology, and there isn't basically something that is going to shift it. So we get this argument with people that are involved with these, is if they would just change what they do, then we could do something different. And what is missing in that conversation is the realization of they can't do it differently.
Mm-hmm.
It's physiologically out of their grasp, and we have to accept that.
That's interesting. So they're unable to do some of the things that we wish they'd do differently.
They're physiologically incapable.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean that everybody that enters into a high conflict scenario that has some of these traits has that diagnosis, that they enter into or pass that threshold, but they may have traits that really mirror this stuff.
Yeah.
And we want to treat it the same, because if they want to change and they can change and they get educated to change, they will change. However, if they don't want to change, if they don't want to do the work, and they're incapable or capable is irrelevant, they're going to get there how they get there. Our management of it is the same.
Okay. I'm sure the listeners who are most frustrated are dealing with somebody that doesn't even want to change on the other side, right?
Well, again, Charlie, you stepped into they don't want to change. We don't know that. We don't know if they can change.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's the distortion of dealing with this that we have to really roll back. That's the trap. And we want to get out of that box. We have to come into this place of they can or they can't, they will or they won't, and it's the same.
Got it. Okay.
Until they do. Because I've seen people go through this that have this look to me of, oh, they're stuck in this. This is where they are. And when I work with them long enough and the light comes on to the damage that they're doing to their children, they slam on the brakes and they go, holy crap, I'm going to jump in here and I'm going to do some work and I'm going to change. And we can see that change. But as the person on the other side of that, we want to support the change when we see it, but we don't want to trust it until it's stable.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get it. So basically the way that we handle it's the same. We don't have to judge whether they can or can't change. The way we handle it's the same. Where do you want to start? Are you going to go through all three of these disorders, or where do you want to start?
Well, I want to start with attachment styles. I want to start with the continuum. I want everybody to understand how we get here, because if we're involved with it, we've got some attachment style stuff going on.
Okay.
And what I want to help relate to here is not only the attachment styles that are involved in the personality, in these high conflict personalities, but how it translates to our children as we're raising them in this complex.
Why don't you define attachment styles first? I understand both the words, what the words mean individually.
Sure.
What does attachment styles mean in this world of relationships?
So we've got basically three attachment styles that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about a secure attachment, and that's that place where we in our own being and as children grew up in an environment where we were nurtured, we were cared for, we had stable parents, there were routines that we went through, and we knew under stress that somebody had our backs, that our parents were there for us. And because they were there for us, not to fix everything, but to help us fix it as we went. In other words, to become self-regulating, to become self-motivated, to when there was a struggle that they helped us work through it. So we were secure in our own being of being able to take care of it, but also knowing that if I skinned my knee, that the parent was there to help me self-soothe, to tell me where the Band-Aids were, and to take care of that injury myself when I reached an age that was capable. And until I did, that they were there to help me do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And this is secure attachment. It's like, I am secure in the world. The world is safe. I'm going to be taken care of. And then the next one off of that secure attachment style is avoidant. And the avoidant style comes from if I attach to somebody, if I make myself vulnerable, that that person isn't going to be there. They're going to let me fall. I'm on my own, and I am not going to really attach to somebody because that is that's risky. They may go away. They may not be there. So I'm going to get out of here ahead of that. I am not going to step into the relationship fully, because if I do, then they may go away. And this is really similar to the other side of the attachment piece, which is the anxious preoccupied. That's the other side of this. And that is a very similar piece to the avoidant in that I don't know where you are. I don't know if you're here. It comes from having a parent that was not present, or that made the world unsafe and that carried a large level of anxiety with them. And when these other complexes start to work over time, then the perspective becomes that perspective of the whole world. So when I enter into a relationship from an anxious preoccupied standpoint, it's like, where are you? What are you doing? Who are you with? Where have you been? And there's not a settling of, oh, you're just at the beach, you're hanging out with your buddies, you're having a good time, and you're coming back here. I know that you're here. So the avoidant and the anxious preoccupied have a tendency to pair up, and it's really a bad pairing, because the anxious preoccupied is asking the avoidant where they are all the time, and the avoidant gets full of, man, you're always asking me where I'm at. This is too much. I can't handle it. I gotta go. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
Yeah.
And the two are actually very close to being the same. They are just a affect or a behavior adaptation of anxiety. So when we go down each one of these timelines of from secure to avoidant or secure to the anxious preoccupied, we start to find narcissism on one side, and we start to find borderline on the other. And these are two of the personality types or personality disorders that we see most frequently in the high conflict cycles.
Narcissism and borderline. So you're saying these are really common in this kind of high conflict relationships. How are they different than the attachment styles? Is there someone like that's a narcissist, avoidant, narcissist, secure attachment, or is avoidant always narcissist, or how are these related?
Well, again, we talked about these being very similar in their origins. They're really adaptations and behavior to an anxiety, and one expresses as narcissism. So I'm out of here, or it's all about me, or I can't relate, I can't come in, I can't connect, I can't fully connect here, and because of that, I can't create a secure sense in my partner. Okay? So that narcissism in the brain development has to do with a lack of empathy. It's all about me. And it's a self-taking care of piece, because for the narcissist, typically, they haven't had somebody there to take care of them. They haven't had somebody to be there that they can count on. So I'm going to take care of myself. And they're very high functioning typically. You know, they don't need somebody because they've never had anybody. So because of that, they don't need that other person to come along with them. And it's a pseudo solution. It's not something that is in a relationship sustainable.
Yeah.
In relationship, we need one another. We are going to count on one another. We want to have that other person's back. So when somebody comes to me, if I'm in a secure attached state and they're anxious, I let them be anxious and I just stay present. I go, wow, that's really hard for you. And when I feel your energy trying to suck me dry or to hold me to do something so you feel okay, I can just sit there and not get charged by it. I don't have to get reactive to it. I can just be understanding of it. And as I do that over time, my partner can settle and their reactivity to trusting me settles.
Yeah.
Right? But if I'm avoidant, if I'm in that narcissistic level, it's like, don't you get this? Can't you do this on your own? Why do you have to be looking for me all of the time? That is going to take them in another direction of, oh, you're not here for me. You don't understand me. And you see how this complex starts to serve, right?
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like narcissism has like you said, it was self-centered. So the selfishness, if you're with somebody that feels very selfish or that can't put others first or can't find joy in putting others first, that's sort of part of that narcissism.
Right. Well, and it's a lack of empathy.
The lack of empathy. There you go.
It's a lack of not being able to connect to the other person's distress, because that distress within me is something that I don't want to go near. It's too much. So I'm out of here. Right?
Yeah.
So it's that pinging of something similar with a different behavior behind it. I can't feel your level of anxiousness, because if I did, that would be too much for me.
Interesting.
So I'm not going to go there.
Yeah. So narcissism, at least as a word I've heard in the world or used in other ways, besides a pretty awesome song from Madonna in the 80s, I've really never heard borderline. Right? Where do we use that in the in the English language? What does borderline mean? Borderline what? Borderline psycho? Borderline what is that?
Borderline behavior is that of oftentimes it comes out of abuse. It comes out of a parent being overprotective, not letting the child experience the world, having this idea of the world is not safe and the only place that we can be is together. And if we're not together, it's not okay. And from a parent to a child, that's really not giving the child what they need to develop the capacity to take care of themselves. They become dependent on somebody else to fix things, to take care of them. And when that person is not there, they're not secure in themselves. So they're looking for an outside source to fulfill that.
Mm.
So the borderline, the core wound of a borderline is that of abandonment. A person isn't there and they're anxious that they're not going to be there. The core wound of a narcissist is that of shame. I'm not worthy of your attention. I'm not worthy of your time. I'm not worthy of your nurturing. So when we look at this in complex, you can see how the two play against each other.
I was going to say, this sounds like there's some similarities. If narcissism, no one has been there, so I'm going to take care of myself. I don't need anyone because I've never had anyone. And then you've got the core wound of borderline being abandonment. It's almost like how their brain responds to the abandonment or someone not being there, whether it's the shame or the just
exactly
fear or something,
Exactly. And what we found through the research in this is the same places in the brain that are underdeveloped are the same in both.
Are these forms of arrested development, that term?
Yeah.
Like how would we explain that?
The brain did not develop in particular areas. So in these cases, for these two in particular, the prefrontal cortex is underdeveloped, and that's a place of cognitive process. So oftentimes we see these people acting in very dramatic ways, like we would expect an adolescent to act. And interestingly, that adolescent prefrontal cortex is not fully developed. And here in these, there's a portion of that mirrors that. Right?
Yeah. Why do you think, I have a lot of experience in my life being around special needs children, going to special needs camps where half the people there are special needs and half the people there are short-term missionaries serving them. I understand when I walk down the street and I see somebody with Down syndromes, I understand what's going on. What's the difference here with these types of disorders? Like, why don't our listeners see it during the 1, 2, 3 years of dating? And then why does it show up so obviously in either the marriage or the breakup?
Well, one, because oftentimes we come out of a similar piece and we're kind of used to some of this behavior and we're a little bit blind to it. Second of all, these people are really high functioning typically in the normal world. I mean, they look and they act and they move like normal people. I mean, people that have a narcissistic tendency are really good at connecting. They're really gregarious. They can come in and they can really make you feel good. We don't see the lack of mutuality until the relationship is under stress or they're under stress. And then their ability to navigate that goes out the window. Yeah. Right? So these particular behaviors, the other thing about, if we want to talk about the borderline type of personality, again, these people, again, are really able to come in and glom on. It's like they will idealize you. And, if you've got a narcissistic tendency, it's like, man, this person just really thinks that I'm all that in a bag of chips. And and I'm going to step in because, God, they really care for me and they really love me. And what it is it's an attempt to really attach and hang on to in an unhealthy way. It's where there isn't differentiation, there isn't sense of self and separation from other. It's a getting lost in process. And initially, both of these can feel really good. And then we start to see what happens under stress, and then the reactions come up and things start to unfold.
And I'm assuming, unfortunately, that if they're able to show up, be gregarious and be kind of amazing and get all the way through the dating without recognizing that they're probably pretty good in a courtroom, right?
They can be. They can be, especially if we're reactive to it. If we are dancing the dance with them, if we are still in that, then they can show up really well, especially to professionals that don't understand this. And let's understand that piece for a moment. Judges are judges. Judges are attorneys. Judges are not psychologists. Even if they study this stuff, having not really been in it in a clinical environment, not really understanding it, they have a hard time seeing it. And it's just this back and forth. So if we are involved with one of these personalities, our job is to just really step back, get out of the reactivity to them, get out of our own cycling with them, and let them show themselves. Because if it's all about me, it's not all about the kids. If it's all about the other person being this big nasty person, and you don't show up that way, but there's this ongoing story of abuse and neglect and all of these things that is incongruent with the reality, then over time this starts to show up. And that's what we want to be able to do. We want to create the space so this behavior can express itself so people can see it. The problem is we want to defend ourselves. We want to counter the story. And when we do it, we just muddy the waters. We don't allow that to happen. And then we get caught in this trap. This whole idea of working with high conflict personalities is one of trusting the process and knowing that if we're conscious of what we're going through, if we understand what we're working with, then it's going to have an organic solution. It's not going to be solved by us trying to fix it. It's going to be solved by us allowing it to show itself.
I don't know why, but when I said they probably show up really well in court, and you said possibly or maybe or something like that, right? The scene from A Few Good Men popped into my head when Jack Nicholson's on the stand. Remember what I'm talking about?
Right.
And
right.
Tom Cruise is pushing him. My favorite courtroom scene of all time. But what happened there? Like, how did he get Jack Nicholson to break? And what do you think was going on in Jack Nicholson? Just for a fun rabbit trail, what was going on in the character Jack Nicholson was playing, where he basically hung himself out to dry because he wanted to, well, I don't know, some sort of narcissism or something, right?
For sure. And he was hiding what was going on. He knew what was taking place in the background, and with enough pressure, he was no longer able to contain.
Yeah.
And this is what comes out of these complexes if we allow them to do it, when they are not getting what they want in it, when the light is being shown on them, that they start to act out.
And this is,
you can't hold the story together.
This is where, to me, it's so important. Things like Our Family Wizard, which we talked about, recording things, filing ex parties when need be. It's like, in some sense, we have to play a part in shining the light on this by recording all the times that they won't deliver the kids when it's time, or whatever, take them out of town without telling us, all these kinds of things. I mean, you know my situation. I've got people in my life that have had exes doing incredibly terrible things for 3, 4, 5 years, and none of it's recorded, right? And then somebody shows up in court and looks really good, but under enough pressure, I believe is what you said, some of that pressure can just, I mean, if a judge is looking at 3 years of one ex not following the orders they put into place, that's not going to make them feel very good, right? And that can be some of the light that finally makes the person pop or act like themselves. And the Our Family Wizard creates such an accountability and just shines a light on everything because it's all recorded, that it could be what either forces them to behave or exposes or makes them pop, like Jack Nicholson on the stand.
Right. Well, this is the reality versus the story. This is the ability to track specific behavior, and that clears up the chaos in the story that the other person is trying to create. And we can only do that if we can track it. And that's one of the places where the tools like Our Family Wizard really come into play, and where we really frustrate the story because, well, that's not accurate. We can see here that this took place. We can see here that this is what's going on. And, this is why those things are such good management tools.
Yeah.
We don't get caught in the argument. It's because there is none. It's like, no, this is here. And we just track it straight through. And it can become very frustrating for the other party.
Right. And it sounds like both of these, from my experience with people who are fear-based or anxiety-based, both of these personality types are going to want to reach out and control everything in their universe because somehow that creates a temporary salve to anxiety, right? They're going to be reaching out, trying to tell you how to do everything in your own home and everything you're doing wrong. And here's how I'd do it if I were you. And we need to be totally disengaged and apply and employ the parallel parenting.
Right.
You talk about dualistic thinking a lot. I've actually never heard it in my life before you. It's something you brought to my world. How does dualistic thinking, kind of the all or nothing thinking, apply here?
Well, the dualistic thinking comes out of that, more of that that borderline piece. It's all or nothing. It's me or you. It's this or that. It's not, it's kind of this idea that you're my hero and now you're my nemesis. And there's nothing in between that was good. There's nothing in between that was valuable. And it's a place where when they move into demonizing you, that's all they see. And it's their need to enlist the other people in their world, their attorney, the judge, their therapist, their friends, to see that and to get them enlisted in the fight against you. So in any place that we get into me or you, you're doing this, I'm good, you're bad, it's dangerous territory. And what we want to be able to do when we're managing these personalities, when we're in the mix with them, is to be able to look at our own dualistic thinking and to peel back and look at what our perspective is in it, what our view of them is, because what we're doing is we're stepping into judgment. And what I'm trying to do with this conversation in particular is to take us out of judgment. These people are no different than us. They have trauma. They have a way of looking at the world that has distortion in it. And what we want to do is look at our own distortion. What is it that I'm not seeing? What is it that I'm doing that is promoting this in that person? Where am I causing the dissidence in this relationship so I can pull that out? So when I'm being attacked by somebody, most of our propensity is to attack back. And when we do that, we're going at their vulnerability just like they're coming at ours. And that is not productive. So for the sake of this conversation, what I want to do is I want to go in, and I've had this conversation with you specifically, Charlie, around this, is where did they get this thought process? Where did this come from? And how is this being projected onto me? And where am I feeding that projection?
Yeah.
Because typically, if we're on the other side of this attack, we're feeding that projection of theirs. Mm-hmm. And when we take that projection away, then we start to see a different manifestation of behavior.
Interesting. So we don't have to judge because we're all just doing our best. We have different trauma than these people. It may be more. Theirs may be more. Have done more damage, right? Or may have been a lot more traumatic than the things that we've been through. Obviously, all of our pain is real for each and every one of us. But
right.
I mean, we got what we got. You know what I mean? I'm 46, and I had the childhood I had the traumas I had the brain development I had, and I wasn't really in control of it then, right?
Right.
We talked about neuroplasticity, and to some degree, we've got a lot of control now over the choices we make of what to say with our mouths and what to focus on and look at and think about and listen to. And
if we exercise it.
If we exercise it.
If we promote it, if we want to make the change, and that's important. And if we've got the capacity.
Yeah. So we can't change them, we can change us. And we can change how we view them. So if someone in your life has narcissism or is borderline, especially somebody that you're dealing with in a co-parenting situation, so you're not really going to get around it. It's not like somebody you can just say, I don't ever talk again, right? Or interact. I guess you don't have to talk, but somehow we have to be dealing with the kids and everything.
But we can minimize it.
You can minimize it, or even have other people reading everything and,
right,
distilling it and giving you the details. So there's a lot less of them you have to have than you realize.
Almost none. I mean, there is so little need for interaction.
That's pretty encouraging. I would think that'd be very encouraging to some of the people listening who, I mean, I've had this feeling in my life. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I tried to leave 3-4 years ago, right? And I can't get away. But there is very little need for almost any interaction, particularly if you have some sort of a surrogate reading long, nasty emails and texts and distilling it into the, Johnny needs to be picked up at 3. That's really all that was in there that had any content.
Right. And what they're trying to do, and we had this conversation a little bit in one of our earlier podcasts about negative intimacy, and that's the flypaper piece. That's that hook where they are trying to bring you back into relationship through conflict. Yep. Zip. And then, we touch it and we get caught in it. So that idea of entering into any conversation with them is an introduction into an argument. It's an introduction into conflict that is absolutely not needed. And I think it's important. It's incredibly important for us to look at where we want to fight, where we want to engage in it, where we want to defend ourselves in areas that don't need defending, where because they said something, we have to counter it. It's contraindicated here. I mean, it's absolutely not needed. And I want to say that in almost any aspect of our life, unless we are doing something that is off. And that, again, is the place for us to go, uh-oh, I am doing that. Let me fix that. And not to say to them, I'm doing that, let me fix that, but to just fix it.
Can I say something about that?
Sure.
It's not really comfortable for any of us to think that there's something in this that I need or that I'm enjoying, right? This fight. We think, oh, we don't want this and everything. But I remember as clear as day, Brooke, when it was, when I was separated from my ex, yet going to multiple counselors, just counselor after counselor after counselor, to try to try to have conversations. I was hoping my ex would see some of the things that she was doing that were hurtful to me and apologize and say, I'm going to change those or whatever. Right. And she had her motives. But I remember when I finally stopped and said, this isn't working, it's over. That should probably feel pretty good or be sort of an ending or whatever. But all of a sudden I had no context anywhere to talk about the things that were upsetting to me or had hurt me because there was no counselor anymore listening. Right.
Right.
And it's such a weird thing to even admit, but like I was bummed. Like I missed being able to share how I felt, you know what I mean? Or say these things that were so hurtful or so meaning for me, tell people what she'd done or whatever. There was, in other words, there was something in the fight, the argument, the complaining, the back and forth with counselors. There was something in it that I wanted or needed. And then when it was gone, I had no context for that and sort of missed it, which is hard to even admit. But there is a piece here, as uncomfortable as it is to admit, there's some reason our listeners are staying in the fight. I mean, nobody stays in something they truly hate. If a bunch of bees are stinging me, I just want away from them. I'm not going to stick around and be like, well, I just want one bee to do it. You know what I mean? I'm out, right? There's something you're engaging in some way because it's meeting some need. It's scratching some itch and identifying that, and I don't know, some sort of repentance, right? Deciding that you need to stop that or whatever is probably healthy.
Yeah, and there's a chemical piece in it too, Charlie, and that's an adrenaline rush. That's a competitive piece. That's a me over you, kind of an engagement. And I remember teaching a class a number of years ago, and I was teaching a class around, of course, disengaging, but it was also around this place of pleasure as it comes into us through the fight. And I had a group of parents sitting at the end of the table, and they were talking about going to court and how they had just annihilated the other parent in it, and what they had done and how they went about it. And they were just full, and they were beaming, and they were laughing. And I stopped them and I said, isn't that interesting? You're really getting off on this.
I remember this. Was this in your book?
No. It was probably a conversation that we had in class.
Yeah, because they were like super psyched that they all won and
right.
beat up the other team,
Right. And on the other side of that conversation is somebody that just got pummeled. They lost custody of their child. They went into this abyss that if it had been on the other foot, they would have been experiencing. So there was a total lack of empathetic response to it. And also an idea of, somebody's in pain here. And I just won. And that feels really good. I won. I just scored a touchdown. I beat them. And it's a normal response. And it's not a productive response here. It's like, we've got to understand that component in our psyche is part of what drives the conflict, and it feels good. So if I'm winning, it's like I want to keep winning, and if I'm losing, it's like I gotta win. And we want to just hack into that part of our psychology. We want to hack into that part of our brain, and we want to consciously eliminate it.
Sounds dualistic to me as well. Like one person wins, one person loses. When did this become a football game? This is actually about like, let's raise healthy kids.
Right.
It's not the Giants against the Eagles, or you know what I mean? This is not winning.
It's not
and
me over you.
No, we're actually both on the same side of the field, trying to get the ball in the end zone. So there's only this. That's the way to think about it. It's not the Giants against the Eagles. It's we're both on the. I'm going to use the Eagles because I was from Philadelphia. We're both on the Eagles trying to get in the end zone. The end zone is happy, healthy kids.
Right.
And then I guess what's the other team is.
And if we've got a parent that doesn't have that perspective, we can't fix it from getting them to do it differently. We just have to do a better job as a parent.
Yeah.
And that's that's where we move back into that.
Awesome.
That parallel parenting and that disengagement piece. And this is how we manage it. This is how we manage the personality types that we're talking about. We don't engage with it. Sit back, we let it. You know, there's a place of this in relationship, in healthy relationship, when our partner, because for many of us, and you know this to be true, that we have one of these personality types, one of these attachment types that we're talking about here today. And we have a tendency to be on one side or the other. And if we're on one side, the probability that our partner's on the other side of that is pretty high. And we can engage in that with them and destroy the relationship, or we cannot engage with it and nurture security within the attachment style that we're headed for. We can nurture that piece where both of us can go, oh, you're doing something different. Awesome. I'm going to move closer. And if you sting me, I'm not going to move away. I'm just going to sit down and I'm going to let that process. And that is going to let that person, if they've got an anxious attachment style, say that they're going to go, oh, you're here. I can trust this. And they'll settle. And we start to move our relationships more to a secure relationship that can endure, rather than get in this back and forth that you've done with them, with your other relationships that have not been successful. Make sense?
Yeah, let me ask about one analogy, and then we'll do a practical application, and we'll wrap it up, okay?
Okay.
I've never been a lifeguard, but I've been around a lot of lifeguards in San Diego and Hawaii, and there's this, I think it's a reality, right? That some people, when feeling like they're drowning or they're in trouble out in the waves or whatever, some people are so scared,
right,
and in a panic that even if you're there to help them, they're either like harming you or drowning you, or like there's something switches inside their brain where they go, I'm in trouble, and it turns on like an inability to think about anything else except for themselves, right? Basically.
Right.
Is that like, because we're going to turn this into some sort of practical application. If on the other side of the relationship, our listeners have someone that acts selfish and does things at time that just seem illogical and wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there some correlation between that and the drowning person, that something about their past, something about the way their brain is wired, or something about the way that they feel like while they do that, something, that same sort of a switch is flipped. They're in a panic, and they freak out.
It's existential terror.
And we didn't have their upbringing. So we really can't say, oh, you're stupid, like, for doing that. We're not inside that body. I don't feel like I'm drowning when I'm not, but they do.
Right. That's what they see. That's what they feel. You're not here. You don't have me. I can't survive without you. And I'm going to crawl up on your shoulders so I can survive. And we're both going to drown.
And brains are legit. I mean, your brain can convince you of some amazing things that aren't actually happening. So
Correct.
To look at someone and judge them, like you talked about moving out of judge, probably the greatest thing that anybody could do as maybe a step one is really step out of judgment. Just say, I'm going to stop saying this person's a jerk, a booger, whatever, for the way they're acting. There's something else going on. Yeah, I still have to deal with it, right?
There's not a spiritual practice on the planet that I'm aware of that doesn't have that at its core.
Some sort of humility or lack of judgment.
Right.
Interesting. That's interesting. So let's say sort of practical application. People are listening. They've heard this explanation of narcissism and borderline personality disorder, and they're going, oh my gosh, my ex has that to the nth degree, right? Mm-hmm. And they're frustrated. They have to deal with them. The ex does things they absolutely hate. They're so frustrated. They've been judging them. Mm-hmm. What can these folks do? We're going to be here next Friday as well. What can these folks do for the next 7 days? Forget like how to change your life for the rest of your life. Let's change 1 week at a time. You know, what can be done differently? What can they do differently for 7 days?
That's a really good question, Charlie. And I think, the piece that I want to keep coming back with everybody is to be able to orient to what's real. This is where I am. This is what's going on. This is the truth of the matter. And what somebody else is saying about me is not accurate, or it's not true. And to not internalize this, not to own something that isn't to be owned, because somebody says it's true doesn't mean that it's true. And to have that in their forefront, so they're not reactive to something that is coming their way. It's like, oh, no, that's not true. And then just to move on and to do something else, and to have this sense that I don't have to defend this. And it's really running counter to our wiring, because when we're attacked, we want to defend.
Yeah.
And this is coming in, to that piece where you talked about Secret Service. It's right. Like when the bullet, when the gun goes off, the head comes up rather than ducking. Mm-hmm. And it's that kind of a reaction. It's just retraining to, what is the reality here? I don't have to duck. I can stay right here and be aware of what's going on. Right?
Yeah.
But their history doesn't take us in that direction.
Yep. We got to retrain ourselves. And this podcast is really about that, right? It's about becoming the Secret Service agent co-parent, or becoming the, Aikido ninja. I'm probably combining two different types of martial arts, but really retraining yourself to be the best you can be, because the kids are worth it. They need it. And it only takes one parent. You're the only hope the kids have. And you being healthy is the answer.
Right.
To these, no matter what happens on the other side.
Right.
Awesome. So we will have there's a little commercial we did to show people where to get in touch with you. But what if somebody just wants to have a conversation with you?
If somebody wants to have a conversation with me, they can email me at Brooke, BROOK, at highconflict.net. That's my personal email. And just give me a little bit of sense of what your needs are, and we can set up an appointment and book some time to have a chat.
Awesome. Very good. All right. We'll wrap it up unless you want to say anything else, Brooke.
I'm good. Thanks, everybody.
Yep. We'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye. Brooke, people don't have to wait until Friday mornings to get more content. If this is something that's helpful for them, right? This isn't the first time you've broadcast anything or recorded anything or put anything out there in the world. What are the other ways people can get the help more aggressively or speed up their recovery process? What materials are available for people right now?
Well, I've written a book called The Black Hole of High Conflict, and it's available on Amazon and Kindle. Great. And everything that we're talking about is really compressed and put into there. So this is a really good starter place to get in and get your mind working, and to see what these concepts are about and how to start to apply them. The other place that I think that is valuable is to go to our website and look at some of the blog articles that I've written. Those are available there as well. They go into some of these other arenas, and that's at www.highconflict.net. So the book, the website are also really good places to get the material. And also we have classes. We have high conflict diversion program classes that you can get into and get some one-on-one help with this as well.
And you know me, I'm aggressive. Whatever I want to become good at or learn, I find someone who's good at it and pay them and hire them and shorten my learning curve. What if somebody just wants your help? Somebody says, Brooke has this information. He's good at something I'm not good at yet, and I want to work with him. Do you have any type of coaching or consultations or anything like that?
Absolutely. I do one-on-one coaching for custody cases. I help people get ready for family court services. If you've got that in your community, I work with attorneys and clients to help them with managing and strategically setting them up to have more successful cases as well.
And how do they reach out? You want them to just go to the website or email or phone, or what's the best way for them to reach out, raise their hand, and say, I need some help?
They can email me. My direct email is Brooke at highconflict.net. That's BROOK at highconflict, HIGH, conflict.net.
Perfect. That's everything everybody would need to get some help, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Brooke.